December 2019, specialist pediatric surgeon Professor Peter Beale handed himself over at the Hillbrow police station, together with anaesthetist Dr. Abdulhay Munshi. There had been a warrant of arrest for them following the death of 10-year-old Zayan Sayed after a medical procedure in October. Now, many other families are questioning the professor about procedures he performed on their children and are alleging he maimed their little ones.
Monique bled out.
His eyes went like open, and that was it.
The surgeon walked into the room once I called him back and pointed at me and said, "It's your fault."
Five-year-old Jaden was born healthy in 2015. A few months later, he started experiencing problems.
One day when I got home, actually, I could hear him crying as I got home. And when I got to the mother, she said, but she can feel and she thinks there's something wrong with him. We took some temperatures, gave him some medicine, and we found that his temperature was extremely high.
According to the family, Jaden was diagnosed with a condition called bilateral duplex kidney systems. Scans showed poor functioning of the upper right kidney and minimal dilation and refluxing in the left lower kidney. This resulted in severe recurring urinary tract infections as well as kidney infections, which meant he was constantly hospitalized. The family was advised the toddler needed kidney surgery to rectify the problems, and Professor Peter Beale was scheduled to do the necessary surgery. Beale, a specialist pediatric surgeon, has had decades of experience in public and private healthcare and is world-renowned in the field of pediatric and neonatal surgery and urology. The Kruger family says the nephrologist compiled all the necessary information pertaining to Jaden and instructed Professor Beale on what needed to be done in surgery. At 8 months old, Jaden underwent surgery in July of 2016.
Up until surgery and even after surgery, we never got an opportunity to meet with him. He never made time to come to see us or discuss the operation with us prior to the operation. And actually the first time that we only managed to make contact with Professor Peter Beale was after surgery.
The family explains that the procedure was clearly described in the email to all the parties involved prior to the operation. They say that what they thought was going to be quite a long, complicated surgery took only about 1.5 hours.
My wife actually, when he left the theatre room, he walked past us and she had to stop him to say, can you maybe explain to us how the operation went? How was the surgery? What is the condition of our son? What can we expect?
When Jaden was wheeled up to the pediatric ward, the pediatrician noticed the operation had been performed on the wrong side.
They didn't have any records of what the procedure that needed to be done. They didn't have any records of that in theatre. The surgeon saw bilateral duplex kidney systems, and he just operated. He operated by what I had told the anaesthetist when the anaesthetist consulted us before the operation to check Jaden's vital signs and to see if he was still fine.
According to the family, the next day, Beale wanted to take Jaden back to theatre, but along with the nephrologist, they fearing that his body would not handle another shock.
Triceratops, Triceratops.
Jaden also had a circumcision in the same procedure. The family says this was not done correctly, resulting in a hole that is still not closed properly. However, they say it was the blame that was put on Nadine that shocked them most.
The surgeon walked into the room once I called him back and pointed at me and said, "It's your fault." I said, "How is it my fault?" He said, "I did what you told the anaesthetist to do."
Nadine says she received an apology from Beale.
And I did ask him what happened, and I did ask him, how do you make such a mistake? As a professional, as a professor, I understand that people make mistakes and anything can happen during surgery, but that was a blatant mistake.
In 2016, the family lodged a complaint with the HPCSA against Beale. He was found guilty of acting unprofessionally and for gross negligence. He was fined 80,000 rand by the council. The hospital, on the other hand, promised that it would reiterate proper protocol to their staff. No one has been able to tell the family what the future holds for Jaden, as the problem was never fixed. The family was advised that complications can come back at any time, so all they can do is monitor him.
Two medical doctors appeared in the Johannesburg Magistrates Court today for allegedly performing botched surgeries on children, resulting in fatality.
Last year, allegations against pediatric surgeon Professor Beale made headlines. The Sayed family, whose son Zayan had gone for what they understood to be a routine procedure for acid reflux and later died, laid a culpable homicide charge against Beale and his colleague Dr. Munshi.
Zayan Sayed, who is the minor child of both Mohammed and Zahira Sayed, went in for what should have been a routine procedure, which was supposed to, in essence, last 1.5 hours, but thereafter took a total of 4 hours. There were a number of complications as a result of this procedure. There were issues which were not disclosed to the parents, and we are of the opinion that the procedure was not necessary in the first place.
Nguni says he is representing at least 25 families who, through various social media platforms, contacted him or the Sayed family and formed a WhatsApp group.
As more and more families come forward, I mean, we have cases that trace back to as far back as the 90s, but a large bulk of them seem to have occurred between the period 2009 to date.
He says there seems to be a common thread in the stories of the families.
And as far as patterns, and similar sort of circumstances between the families, definitely, and that is why we feel that, you know, we have a strong case. And all the families, as I said, are in unison and want to ensure that this does not happen to any other family, and this experience leads to some sort of radical transformation of the medical fraternity. You know, we in essence just want accountability.
For the Sayed family, the wound is still fresh.
It was their firstborn son, and they are battling emotionally, but you know, the memory of their son is what's keeping them going at this stage, you know, to ensure that obviously they preserve his memory and to ensure that his death was not in vain, by ensuring that this does not happen to any other child in the Republic.
Many of the families accusing Beale of maiming their children when he operated on them say they simply want answers. RENE MOORCROFT says Beale operated on her 12-year-old daughter, Monique, who had Hirschsprung's disease, a condition which affects the large intestine or colon of newborns and causes difficulty passing stools.
First consultation, you know, I was highly impressed. It's a professor. He's well in his age. So I was like, oh God, thank you. You sent someone. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. So it was like...
She went to see him in May 2019 and he scheduled a procedure for a colostomy in June. She went back for a consultation in August and another procedure for September was scheduled. However, they didn't understand the need for this operation.
My husband wasn't happy about it. Me, myself also, because I mean, you remove the one, you put another one. Doesn't make sense. You never told me you're going to put the colostomy. From grade 1.
She says Beale indicated he was happy with Monique. However, the little girl never quite recovered from this operation. She was informed that Monique was not breathing properly. Despite all efforts by staff to resuscitate her, she didn't make it.
I just knew that she was gone. And then they just declared dead at, 5:30? Because I remember they couldn't find Dr. Beale when they phoned him for resuscitation. They got a doctor from theatre and I don't know where, but the other one, where she came from. Then he came afterwards.
Renee explains that none of the staff could tell her why her daughter passed on. It was suggested she get a post-mortem. She is still awaiting the results. She also opened a police case. She describes what she was told could have gone wrong.
Monique bled out. She was bleeding through her anus. She was bleeding out when they were busy resuscitating her. Why would you bleed out? That's my question. I would love to know why my daughter died, because I mean, it's like impossible that her sisters or someone in the street might ask me why she died, and I'm like, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense.
THUSO MOKOENA says he was ignored by Bill when he demanded accountability from him after the demise of his son Thapelo, who was diagnosed with a rare condition called TOF. This is a tracheoesophageal fistula, an abnormal connection between the esophagus and trachea.
The doctor said, okay, no, let's take the baby to the hospital so that he's checked thoroughly if everything is okay. That is when then we met the professor.
Initially, Thapelo had surgery to fix what the family was told was some sort of obstruction. So instead of food going down, it was being blocked. After the surgery, the family was assured Thapelo would start feeding normally. However, Thapelo then needed another operation. It seemed his condition had not been fixed. This made the family uncomfortable.
We were hoping that he heals by himself and then without being operated.
After a series of procedures, Thapelo was discharged, but he needed to come back so they could change the feeding device and put in another device called a Mickey, which is a button. The toddler went back for this procedure 2 months later. It was done in a room where the family could be present.
As I'm going inside, Professor Bill is going out. Now, looking at him, just looks away and then he goes. And then I get inside and then I ask them, where is he going? Is he getting something to do the procedure? And they say, no, he's done. I'm like, he's done? What do you mean he's done? They said, no, he's done. And then now, but I'm looking at them, what's wrong? The child is crying. My wife is upset. They say, he just pulled that tube. He just pulled it like, poof. Pulled the tube and inserted that button. Like, he just did like this. And he went out.
He says when they got home, the baby just deteriorated.
And then after some time, my wife carries the child and then now comforting the child. And then now as she was comforting the child, see blood out of the nose. And then his eyes went like open and that was it.
The paramedics were called, however, there was very little they could do. The police were also called. The family was told that SABC would have to take the body to do a post-mortem. Too traumatized, the family says they decided not to pursue it and buried their son. THUSO continued to demand answers from the professor and says he was ignored. THUSO persisted and Bill responded almost 2 years later, saying it was in fact unclear from what the toddler succumbed to and that it was inappropriate for the family and paramedics with no knowledge or insight to call it medical negligence. THUSO says it all took a toll on him and he never got the strength to follow through with a complaint to the HPCSA.
I saw what happened and this time, fortunately, he had to do it in front of us and then showed us that he doesn't even care to see it through, to check the child if the child is okay.
Families say they want accountability from Bill. However, proving medical negligence is complex, says ADELE van der Walt, an attorney specializing in medical negligence.
When it needs to be determined whether there's negligence, you refer to the reasonable doctor test. So in layman's terms, I usually advise a patient or a client to say, argument's sake, it's gynecology or orthopedic matter. If you take 10 doctors in that same discipline field, if 8 out of 10 doctors would have followed the same procedure in the same way and the end result would have been more or less the same, the doctor acted reasonably.
She explains that without all the medical facts and an expert medico-legal report, it's difficult to determine whether there is indeed a claim. For example, she says anesthesia is a super specialized field on its own. People react to it in different ways.
If it's between 3 to 5% of an acknowledged risk, a possible risk, the patient needs to be informed about this. If the patient, argument's sake, it's vocal cord paralysis with a neck fusion, and you work with a professional singer, there are a bigger obligation on the doctor's side to take caution on the initial discussion, the advice, or even to advise such a patient to get a second opinion. It's not required from a doctor with a smaller percentage, less than 3%, to explain and inform the patient of all those risks. Otherwise, you're going to sit with lengthy consultations. And by the way, you know, on statistics, 80% of whatever is part of a consultation's content, the patient cannot recall thereafter. So again, there's an obligation on the patient to take part, to understand the basic things and to ask questions.
Getting justice is not always a quick fix.
So if something happens with a patient with an adverse end result, you either consider unethical or unprofessional conduct if there's a basis for that. That's a complaint with the HPCSA, Health Professions Council, but there must be a basis, otherwise it's not going to go anywhere. Or a civil suit, that's for medical negligence. We have to prove that your damages is a direct and only result of failure on the doctor to act promptly or adequately. You have to prove that. And that's then for compensation. The third possibility is if there is an inquest where a patient passed on due to unnatural causes, it's possible then from the state side to do a procedure where they actually have a procedure to investigate whether it's unnatural causes of death and whether the doctor is then liable for culpable homicide. So that's a criminal offense.
Pediatric surgery is a super speciality. In South Africa, it consists of a small community of about 100 pediatric surgeons in the private and public sector combined. Dr. MARIZA de VILLIERS, a pediatric surgeon in Pretoria, describes the workings of her field and what it entails. She speaks about her personal experience working with the children and their parents. She's not commenting on the allegations or merits of the Beale case.
Most of the time, children can't really tell you when they have a problem or tell you what's bothering them. So you have to rely on the parents, and then you have to rely on your clinical skills or your investigating the subject or the patients to see what the problem is. Yeah.
She explains the intricacies involved when operating on children.
Outside of the theatre scenario now, I almost always work with a pediatrician. So to me, maybe I don't trust my knowledge well enough, or whatever the case might be, but the pediatricians have another way of approaching a patient. So if I've got a critically ill patient, I would ask them to come on board as well, and both of us would look together at the patient.
She says the profession is not without risk, and during a procedure, complications may arise.
If a patient dies in theatre, it's either because they were really sick, which doesn't make it easier, but it makes it a little bit easier because you are prepared. You go and you know this child is very sick, and you tell the parents as well, this child is very sick. The anaesthetist will tell the parents, your child is very sick and he might die under anesthesia. So everybody knows that. So if that happens, it's a little bit easier, but still not easy.
There are a growing number of calls from the medical fraternity concerned about the criminal charging of doctors. Currently, more than 60,000 people have signed a petition for authorities to drop the criminal case against Professor Peter Beale and Dr. Munshi. They believe the culpable homicide charges against the medical professionals were premature. The South African Medical Association has also cautioned against the criminal charging of medical personnel.
It's dangerous because it opens up a precedent for other patients sitting out there and thinking that's the way to go, and to accuse doctors of malpracticing, but going straight to the criminal court. So what you're going to happen in the end of the day is that you will not have doctors practicing medicine either because of fear or being prosecuted at a criminal court, or what can happen is you can get over-servicing, because a doctor would like to make sure that no one can take him to court and therefore do all the tests, and who's going to pay for that. So it can be, that's why we say this is a dangerous situation, because it opened up another avenue for people to think that that is the right way to go and accuse a doctor of malpracticing without going through the internal processes.
Dr. COETZEE acknowledges there is a problem with the system.
If the hospital picks up that Dr. X got a history of adverse reactions or long stays in the hospital, they need to look at that. They also need to come to the party and say, listen, this is not acceptable. What is going wrong, doctor? Why are you the only, or why are you one of the few doctors? If you operate on a patient, there's always complications afterwards. What is wrong? But currently in a hospital system, if you keep the bed full and if you keep the theatres full, the hospitals are happy because that's generating some income to the hospital.
She says she understands that what aggrieved families want most is accountability.
It is that common understanding between a patient and a doctor that will clear up a lot of misconceptions out there and prevent just going to court or to the HPCSA.
The HPCSA has suspended Beale. The council says there are 2 pending complaints against him. Beale has been suspended from Netcare. Netcare says doctors are not employed by the hospital group, but instead have independent practices at private hospitals. It says doctors are fully responsible and have sole discretion for the clinical decision-making regarding their patients. The Life Healthcare Group promised to respond to our request about Beale, but didn't. Mediclinic suspended Beale in 2016 and formally terminated his services in November of the same year. Beale declined an interview with us. His attorney said he will cooperate with any legitimate investigation into his management of any patient by relevant authorities. Munshi sent a statement saying his thoughts are with the Sayed family and he is limited in what he can say due to patient confidentiality. He says he always strives to provide the very best care for his patients and act in their best interests.